Hello BookTube, Sarah here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my weekly reviews for October 13th through the 19th. I finished 3 books this week, so it was a bit of a slower reading week for me, but as you guys know, I was on vacation for the tail end of the week, and I'm pretty pleased with all the books that I read, so 3 books is not too shabby at all. So let's jump in and talk about them. So the first book that I finished was The Garden on Sparrow Street by Tilly Tennant. I label this as more of a chick lit novel than necessarily a romance. There is a romance that is prominent in the story, but I feel the bulk of the story is more about the friendship between our main character and her friend, along with people, the way people interact with each other and things like that. I'll explain more as I talk about the book. This book was published on October 9th of 2019, so it is a new release. Goodreads average rating of 4.31 stars. Guys, I gave this one 4.5 stars. I thought it was adorable. For my challenges, this was for my Triple RC. It was for category number 7, which was Balloons Around the World Day. And for that prompt, you needed to read a book that had a colorful cover. And this book obviously does have a colorful cover. So this is the story of Nina. And Nina is not a recent widow. Her husband passed 2 years earlier. And it takes place in the UK, in a very small town in the UK. And she has a best friend named Robin, whose husband also passed away. The 2 women met while their husbands were living in the hospice. And at the start of our story, they are working together in a charity shop for that hospice. And the charity shop is closing its doors. So they're kind of trying to figure out what to do next with their lives. Neither one of them have a job. They've been kind of living off, I guess, pensions and things like that their husbands had. Robin, from the story I'm gathering, is in her mid to late 40s, where Nina, our main character, is in her mid to late 30s. When she met and married her husband, Nina's husband was already ill. He had some sort of a muscular disease, and they actually got married. When they got married, he was in a wheelchair. So they knew at the beginning that he wasn't, sadly, very long for this world. And, you know, over the time of their marriage, he started to deteriorate and eventually passed away. So like I said, so they are working in this charity shop, and it is, you know, about a month before Christmas. So they're kind of trying to decide what next steps they're going to make. Both of them know they need to get jobs at some point because they can't live off of this money or these savings that they have forever. And Nina lives on Sparrow Street, which is where the title of the book comes from. And there's a little community garden on Sparrow Street. And one of Nina's neighbors, Nasser, has decided that he wants to rejuvenate the garden. And, you know, it kind of becomes a project for all the neighbors on this street. And you meet an amazing group of characters. It is utterly delightful. These twin sisters are just a hoot. They're older women, and throughout, anytime they're talking, they're finishing each other's sentences. It's absolutely delightful. Nasser and his wife are just, you know, I adored them. There's a neighbor by the name of Rob who's he's a little bit of a stick in the mud, if you will. He's there for the group project kind of an idea if there's food involved. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. So essentially the entire story is about them putting this garden together because Nina, and Robin end up having this idea to turn it into some sort of a memorial garden where, because it's so close to Christmas, they are actually going to sell these lanterns that have like battery operated candles in them. And you can put a person's name in it, in memorial kind of an idea. And they're going to hang it on this tree in this garden. And all the money raised will go to various charities. And I just loved the idea. It was so heartwarming. It was so, what I loved, it was so Christmas without being in your face Christmas. It was the true spirit of Christmas without being commercial, if that makes sense, which a lot of books tend to fall into that aspect of it being more about the commercialization of Christmas, whereas this one was truly about the spirit of Christmas without being too in your face. So it does take place at the holidays. So I have put it on my shelf on Goodreads in Christmas, but it's not an overtly Christmas story. So if you are someone who does not celebrate that holiday, just know that you can still appreciate the story without feeling too bombarded with the Christmas season. And then, of course, there's a romance in here, as I mentioned. Now, my one caveat, and the one thing, I didn't take this away from the star rating on the book. I'm 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it. You guys know a book truly has to wow me to get 5 stars. And this one was very close to teetering on the edge. I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I've told everybody that they need to read this. I said to my mom, I'm like, the next book you read needs to be this one. I said, pick it up next. You're going to love it. It's one of those books that you could give to anybody to read. There is a little bit of swearing in it. There is mentions of adult content, but nothing happens, like that, nothing on the page. It's a clean story. And the banter between Robin and Nina as these two friends is just priceless. There were some great one-liners in this book that I absolutely adored. So anyway, like I said, there's a romance in here. And the one thing that kind of bothered me just a little bit, and like I said, I'm not holding it against the book, is that on the back of the book, it talks about the fact that Nina meets this guy by the name of Colum. And he is actually a gardener. And through various things that happen, he ends up coming to lend a hand in the garden. And so a romance blossoms between the two of them. And on the back of the book, it says, then Colum's wife comes back. Like, he is still technically married, but his wife took off 5 years earlier to move to Spain, to join some commune or something like that. And on the back of the book, it says she comes back. Spoiler alert, she doesn't come back till 85% of the way through the book. So I really dislike it when publishers do that. Like, I guess to enhance the, I gotta read this to find out what's going to happen kind of an idea. And when it doesn't happen till 85% of the way through the book, like, I kept expecting it to happen because I'd read the back of the book. Now I know why Steph over on her channel, she always says that she goes blind into reading books and she doesn't read stuff like that. So it didn't take anything away from the story, don't think anything like that, but it was still utterly delightful. But know that conflict doesn't take place till much later. And, it was still fantastic. I absolutely loved it. Again, I highly recommend it. Tilly Tennant is very quickly becoming a new favorite author of mine. Every book by her that I've read, this is now the 3rd, she just keeps getting higher and higher on that list of must-read authors. Anytime I now see a new book from her coming out, I have to get my hands on it and read it. am thinking now, because this was, I forgot to mention, I apologize. This was a NetGalley read, excuse me. So many thanks to NetGalley and Bookuture, I think is how you pronounce it, for sending me an ARC to review this. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. But I do think I want to go out and buy a physical copy of this to have on my shelf because it is a beautiful book. It was a wonderful, wonderful holiday story. And again, I highly, highly recommend it. The next book that I finished was another holiday read, and this was The Matchmaker's Mistletoe Mission by Jaci Burton. This is definitely a contemporary romance. Book number 0.5, so it's the prequel novel to the Boots and I can never say this word, the Boots and Bouquet series. This also was published in October this year. It came out on October 15th of 2019. Average rating on Goodreads of 3.45 stars, guys. I give it 3.5 stars. And again, thanks to NetGalley and the publisher Berkeley for sending me an ARC of this book to review. This was a cute story. It was short. It came in right around 150 pages. True novella, I think. And the story is pretty much about our main character, Alice. And she is a matchmaker by profession. She lives in Los Angeles, and this is what she does for a living. Her best friend is getting married, and it's about a week before Christmas. And I believe it takes place in, I want to say Oklahoma, but I could be wrong. I do apologize. And she goes out a week before the wedding because her best friend and her best friend's fiance are both traveling. So she's there as the maid of honor to kind of oversee some of the last minute wedding preparations. Well, at the very beginning of the book, she ends up getting snowed in with the family who runs this vineyard where the wedding is taking place. So she ends up spending a few days there, and she meets a guy by the name of Clay. And Clay lives like on the next ranch or farm or whatever it is. And he gets stranded in this snowstorm as well. And the two of them kind of, have an instant attraction to each other, if you will. But she kind of wants to put the brakes on that because she lives in Los Angeles. Like, it would be a long distance relationship, and she's just not interested in that. So she decides to, spend the few days that they're snowed in to become his matchmaker. And she's going to find him, his happily ever after, essentially. When the truth is that he's only going along with it to spend more time with her. This story was so cute and adorable. I really, really loved it. I am a big fan of Jackie Burton's writing. I've read a lot of her stuff before. This is the second book by her I've now read this year. I love the premise of this series. I think most of the stories are going to take place around this vineyard, which just sounds perfect. And I love the idea. Cute, short, great little Christmas story. I highly recommend it. Gets spicy, some adult content. Do keep that in mind. The characters are all delightful. I really liked Alice. I really liked Clay. I do recommend this one. Again, pick it up. It's only a novella, so it'll be a quick and easy read. I definitely think that you will enjoy it. And the last book that I finished this week was another holiday book of sorts, and that was The Trouble with Valentine's Day by Rachel Gibson. This was another contemporary romance novel. This was narrated on audio by Kathleen Early. Book number 3 in the Chinooks hockey team series. This was originally published in 2005. Average rating on Goodreads of 3.94 stars. I gave it 4 stars. I read this one for Romanceopoly. This was the last mystery prompt, and it was to read a sports-centered romance. They specifically asked for, I think, hockey and football. So the series is about a hockey team, and our main character, Rob, is a former hockey player for the Chinooks. I'll explain about that in just a minute. So this one was a lot of fun. It was about Kate and Rob. And Kate and Rob meet at the very beginning of our book on Valentine's Day in a ski lodge. And she essentially is going through a bit of a dry spell. And she decides to throw caution to the wind and essentially proposition Rob, if you will, in this bar. And he turns her down flat. And she's kind of like, well then. But she doesn't know who he is. She doesn't find out till much later that he is a former, rather famous hockey player for this hockey team. It's the Seattle Chinooks, which is a fictionalized hockey team. And anyway, so while she wasn't at this ski lodge to go skiing, she was there to stay overnight on her way to her grandparents' or her grandfather's home. I believe it takes place in Idaho, I think. Again, I apologize if I'm getting the state incorrect. And so she ends up, at her grandfather. She makes the rest of the way, and she's, kind of, dusting off her pride, and, it wasn't her, it was him, and blah, blah, blah. And she's trying not to let it bother her. And then after being so she's in this small town to look after her grandfather because a couple years earlier her grandmother had passed away. And her grandfather runs a local grocery store in town, in this very small town. And she's there to kind of help him get back on his feet. It's been 2 years. He doesn't seem to be moving on. And she's just trying to help him do that. There's some great references. There is tons of Tom Jones in this story. It's so funny. Now, it was written in 2005, which is what now, 14 years ago? So, I mean, at the time, it was dating itself with Tom Jones. But her grandmother, Kate's grandmother, loved Tom Jones. And every time you turn around in the story, there's a mention of Tom Jones. She had salt and pepper shakers. At the grocery store, they only played Tom Jones records. There's pictures of him in the house. And because his grandfather, or her grandfather, has not removed any of the items from when her grandmother was alive. You expect the grandmother to walk back in the door that, she's still living there and here's all of her stuff, kind of an idea. So after she's been in town for a couple weeks working at the grocery store, she runs into Rob. Well, it turns out he owns the sporting goods store right across the street from the grocery store, of course. And then she starts to find out about his past, and then she kind of gets even more miffed about the fact that he turned her down. Because he was well known as a hockey player as kind of being very promiscuous. He cheated quite often. He was married at one point. His marriage broke up because he cheated on his marriage broke up for several reasons, but one of them was that he cheated on his wife. But in that instance, that what he did also ruined his hockey career. Because you know what? I'm not going to tell you his backstory. I think you need to read it. Let's just say he's learned his lesson on cheating on somebody. And he has not had a relationship since this incident that took place. And him and Kate, kind of start dancing around each other, and of course a relationship starts. This book does get spicy in parts. There is quite a bit of adult content. It's a really cute and sweet story. I love the small town aspect. I love the fact that it's a sports romance in a way, because Rob is a former hockey player and the team is talked about. But unlike the Brooklyn Bruiser series by Serena Bowen, which I do really, really enjoy, you're not getting that hockey play-by-play. At least I didn't. No, there wasn't in this story. Like, you know, I found quite a bit with the Brooklyn Bruiser series that you felt like you were at a hockey game at certain parts. You know, like they were talking about, you know, penalties and this and that and the other thing. And it literally felt like you were reading a play-by-play of a hockey game or parts of a hockey game. Whereas you still got the sports aspect with this story, but you didn't get that play-by-play. As someone who is not generally that much of a fan of hockey, I appreciated that. And to read about a player who used to play and for various reasons now his career is over, it was really good. I enjoyed it. Again, it was from 2005. It's a slightly older series, and now that I've read this one, I am going to go back and start at the beginning, and I'm going to start reading the series in order because I really do enjoy it. I don't know you know, how much hockey is involved in the other stories, but I'm assuming the other stories are about current players. But I do love the fact that she took a former player and used him in a story. And his story was really good. His backstory is really good, and it's really, really interesting. Like I said, I don't want to tell you about it because when I finally got to that point in the book, I was like, oh, wow, you know, like, that's super creepy and interesting, you know? Like, it was really, really good. And I really liked Kate. She did have a bit of an attitude. She, you know, and I'm all for women's rights 100%. But Kate in some instances took it just that little bit further. Do you know what I mean? You know, very women's lib. And, you know, you gotta love that though, especially when you're dealing with older gentlemen in a small town atmosphere, you know, that, yeah, I can shovel the front walk. It's okay, Grandpa, I can do it. You're 82. I'm only, you know, under 30. I can definitely shovel the walk, kind of an idea. You know, and it was delightful. I really, really loved it. Highly recommend it. If you love a good sports romance, I recommend this series now, that even though I've only read book 3, but I've heard a lot of good things about the series and I cannot wait to read more. So anyway, guys, that is all that I have for this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, or are you interested in reading any of them now that I have talked about them? I would love to know that too. And until my next video, everybody, take care and happy reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye, guys.